Uh-huh. Want some peanuts? It is my dinner. Oh. Here.
Hey, Kristen.
I know. In the nicest way possible.
Patrick.
Did you turn it back on again?
It says unmuted.
But you know something? On Tuesday, Joe had two sources of speaker on his computer.
Is it muted? Yeah, there it goes. Oh, there's muted now. There you go.
Well, here's the last of the litter.
So if you have earbuds, we can stick them in.
Ah,
Oh, yeah, no more Richard, yeah. One and two, yeah.
Okay.
ah.
Okay. Test one, test two.
Here we go.
There we go.
Gotta-
Bravo.
Was that feedback from the microphone?
It was from the
German
the
pronunciation.
speaker. You just
Kristen,
switch it off.
Piper.
Oh, Piper.
If you were in Germany,
Yeah, there are
yes,
two. We
but
just
we are
learned
not.
that
So
there are two
it's
sources
I-
of speaker on computers now. Isn't that interesting? I didn't know
Aye,
that.
aye.
Yeah, the only audio that should be coming through is this. So everyone can hear. On Zoom, they can hear this, and you can hear them on Zoom through the PA.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we got everybody we're gonna get?
Yeah, Patrick just stepped out.
Okay, it is,
Sorry, then if you speak, you have to grab the mic,
Oh, yeah, here.
Is there one on the floor? Is there one on the floor?
Unless now, is anyone going to speak at the podium tonight?
Probably not.
Probably not.
So here, take this.
Yeah, let me just.
Yeah, we can share.
We're sharing.
What am I, huh?
What are we sharing?
This microphone.
Oh.
So if we both want to speak at once, it's going to be a problem.
I'll defer to you.
all right, are we ready?
Yes, Jack?
All right, it being 6:05 and there being a quorum present, we shall commence the meeting. Let's do the roll call first. I'm going to call out the names and give me a here if you're here. Don't give me a here if you're not here. Okay, Dana, Alara,
Here.
Emil,
Here.
Kristen Kasner,
I'm here.
myself, Rick Mitchell,
Here.
David Wanger,
Present.
Lauren Lynch,
Here.
Carolyn Wells. She's there.
I'm here.
She's muted, I guess.
No, I heard her. Yeah.
You did?
Yep.
Oh, okay, good. Ashley Sweet.
Ashley will not be with us tonight.
Ashley will not be here tonight.
Yeah, I think you just need to call a roll call of us.
Are we okay?
Okay.
Jack,
Got-
would you forget a few of
Yeah,
us?
if there's,
Why don't you run that?
if those are the notes from the first meeting, my name wasn't on there and you hadn't been nominated yet. I'm not sure.
So Rosie,
Rosie,
Kennedy, here?
Rosie Kennedy.
Kristen Piper here.
I'm getting the alphabet proper here, so, okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay, the only one we're missing then is Ashley Sweet from Weston and Sampson. All right.
Jack?
you got to speak into the microphone, Jack, directly.
Yeah.
Be pointed directly at you, yeah.
Can you hear that?
I can hear it now, it's better.
Okay, good. Couple of housekeeping chores first. I don't think we approved the minutes from the meeting of May. What was that? We don't have, I have not seen the minutes from last week. That's this last meeting. We don't have those yet, right?
I haven't seen those.
No.
No,
Seen any minutes?
but I think we had them from May, the first meeting. Where the hell is that?
I think that was June the 3rd, wasn't it?
Was it
I was
June?
out of town.
Well, the second meeting, right, wasn't it?
My perfect system has already come unglued. Okay, here we go. May 20th. May 20th. Has anybody read those? Are we prepared to approve them? Do I have a motion?
You want a motion?
Yeah.
I move that we approve the minutes from May 20th as presented.
All in favor?
You need a second.
I'll second that.
Second.
Second, oh, thank you. All, Emil seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Yeah, any nays? No.
Abstain, I was not here.
No nays.
I'll abstain too, I was not.
Two abstentions.
If I could do that.
And I'll just note, I think Carolyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she added my name to the list of attendees, so there may be an updated version, so we should use that version.
Okay. Ooh. All right, difficulties. All right, one other piece of housekeeping. Wayne Castanguay has offered, who is the head of the Ipswich River Watershed Association, has offered to do a familiarization on the water situation in the area here. And he would like to get as many people at this as he can do in one fell swoop. Probably in early August at a time convenient. Is that something that you all would like to do?
Yeah.
No.
No?
No.
No.
I don't think it's appropriate at all.
All right.
We're just beginning the plan, a master plan, and now we're diving into a specific issue that the group has not agreed on as a vital piece of information that should be researched. So I think it's really way out of order in terms of presenting ad hoc and sort of in the middle of a process that we're trying to establish and we have not yet established.
I would call it background information for general assessment of where we are. It's as a familiarization and part of the foundation process, which is why I suggested it, but I'm perfectly happy to not do this.
Well, if you do that, then you need to bring in Tim Olson to talk about what the town's point of view is on the water situation, and then we're into a whole discussion that is not on the agenda, is not at this point in time a relevant piece of discussion. We've got pages of information talking about guiding principles, community discussion points, public participation that Emil has put together, what Kristen's put together. We're still deciding, what our vision is, and then suddenly to jump into a specific topic area that doesn't fit into any context yet, I think does a disservice to the entire process.
So Jack, maybe the operative word is yet.
Right.
With your permission, perhaps this should be tabled until we get farther along
Okay.
in our own internal process, and then be able to construct the context for going forward.
Thank you, David.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I would just say that if that is something we're open to, if there are other issues that there are experts who could come and present to us, I know I would find that very useful. That's not my area of expertise. I'm in healthcare. I could talk about health policy all day long, but these other issues are not things I know a whole lot about. And so I would appreciate other presentations from other subject matter experts in the area,
Right.
not
I
just
think that's
water.
key, to tell you the truth. I
Yeah.
think we should have a full understanding of, things that are going on in this town. The
I would agree with I would agree that it would be helpful to understand a little bit more about the water as well as the just economics of the town and other of those main topics that we've been discussing at some point, for sure.
Okay, so,
I would just add that you all are paying us to do this analysis. And we've got the GIS layers set up to understand the water situation. So there is a point where we will definitely want to have a caucus with all of the pertinent people and experts, as you say. I mean, again, this isn't on the agenda, but also, in terms of data and research, it does help to have that up front before conversation begins.
okay,
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
all right. So, we'll just table that for now then, and we'll move on? Okay. Second issue, it has been suggested that perhaps we should do the Weston and Sampson part now, move number 2, and possibly number 3 up and then 2. What's the feeling on that? And just so that we can be introduced to Eric Halverson.
Sounds good.
Carolyn, the thought being, Eric, this would be his first appearance. Whoops, we've gone blank.
Yeah, every once in a while it kind of comes in and out.
What's that?
Eric is here.
Carolyn, are you there?
I think they can still
Yeah.
hear each other. We just can't see each other.
Carolyn, are you there?
Yeah.
I would like to move you up in the agenda here, and do your part here. Is number 3 is the introduction of Eric Halverson. Do you want to do that first, and then do what is here under number 2, Weston and Sampson update?
Sure.
Sure. Is that the right order that you would like to do it?
I think that's fine with us. Just forgive me. There's a little bit of the audio is a little rough, so it just takes me a little bit of time to kind of digest what you're saying.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Right in.
But we're happy to do however you want to run it. We're good with that. Eric is here and waiting. RKG Associates, we partner with them on a number of projects. They specialize in economic analysis, housing, real estate, and they're on this project for the same purpose: economic development analysis, housing. There's a task item called fiscal impact analysis, but what it really is understanding how potential growth scenarios for Hamilton could impact town revenues and the town fiscal situation. So that is what they are on board for. Eric, can you hear us?
I can. Yep, I can hear. I was just on mute. Yep. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here, and happy to be joining Weston and Sampson on the project. And I think Carolyn gave a decent overview, but if you have any questions for me specifically now or throughout the evening, as long as we're here, I'll be here.
It would be nice to hear a little bit, kind of an overview of that economic element, and Eric, what your thoughts are and process moving through that element.
The economic development chapter of the master plan piece?
Yes.
Yeah. Sure. So, I mean, typically when we do this, and if there are other issues or concerns that come up, I mean, I know we haven't really started too much. We've started to just poke around the edges of the data analysis a little bit, but we'll uncover some other issues. But generally, we'll be looking sort of at a couple of different pieces. One is just trying to get a sense of the employment base and the jobs that are in Hamilton, and also the occupation base. So not only industry sectors that exist in Hamilton itself and the business types that are there, but also what people are doing who actually work in Hamilton. We'll also want to try to get a sense of what Hamilton residents do for a living as well. So not only what are they doing, but also where are they working, where are they commuting to, what percentage of the residents that are currently in the workforce work in Hamilton or able to find jobs in Hamilton versus those that are traveling outside the community for work. I imagine that percentage in Hamilton, like many other communities in Massachusetts, is probably fairly high. So we'll be looking at that. Maybe there'll be some strategies or recommendations, that are looking at if there's some mismatch there between, the sectors that residents are working in and sort of where they're traveling to, if there's opportunities to try and attract some of those industry sectors to Hamilton to cut back on people's commutes, or maybe there's an opportunity for people who live in Hamilton to open up businesses in Hamilton so they're not commuting as far. We'll be looking at those pieces. So that's kind of the sort of socioeconomic baseline analysis of the economic development chapter. And then the other big piece that we usually look at is more on the real estate side. So the actual buildings and the assets that are in the town. So we'll be looking at what types of businesses are there today and where are they located. We'll be taking the parcel database and the assessment database, joining those two things together and actually looking spatially across the community to try and figure out where commercial uses are, whether it's retail or it's office or industrial uses, sort of where those activity centers, those business centers, those commercial centers are. And then looking more closely at the composition of those centers to see if there are opportunities to grow them, to preserve them, to sustain them, and we'll start to tease some of that out as we work with you and also as we get input throughout the process from residents along the way to figure out, what does Hamilton want to be in 10 or 20 years, and how can we use this master plan as a tool to achieve those goals. We'll look at the tax base and sort of how that split is currently. I imagine, just what little I do know about Hamilton, I imagine it's heavily residential at this point in time, but we'll explore that tax base and see how much of it is comprised of different land use types. And then we'll look at kind of the real estate market itself. So are there vacant properties in the community that could be built on if they're undeveloped at the time? Are there opportunities for redevelopment or adaptive reuse in the community? So some of that we'll get from, say, a driving tour of the community and looking at the different activity centers. Some of that we'll get from the parcel database and the assessment database, and some of that we'll get from proprietary resources that we have in-house where we can look at sort of what's happening not only in Hamilton, but also just a broader market that surrounds Hamilton and other opportunities for bringing things in that might not be in there today, but are actually active and present in the larger context of the market. So just at a high level, those are the kind of bigger pieces that we'll be looking at as we go through the economic development chapter. And as I mentioned, I can guarantee it that through our conversations together, through these forums, as well as input from residents and others who take part in the master plan process, I know other questions, issues, opportunities are going to come up along the way. So we'll be fully prepared to respond to those as well.
Jack, may I?
Please.
I want to make a comment initially to both Carolyn and Eric, and it deals with process. As Carolyn said, we are paying you for your services. So in that context, it was determined at our last session that it might make sense for me to confer with Eric to familiarize him with economic modeling that the Finance Committee and the Capital Committee are undertaking to avoid duplication and perhaps share information. So I emailed Carolyn asking for Eric's contact information, and Carolyn, you never responded to me. So I took it upon myself to find the website for Eric's organization and sought by telephone to contact Eric either in the Boston or New Hampshire office. The phone rang once and then cut off. So I called the Washington, D.C. office, spoke to a gentleman who said he would contact you, Eric, and give you my contact information and ask you to call me, and he also gave me your email. I have not heard from you by telephone. I sent you an email detailing all of this, and you never responded to my email. So this is, I hope, not emblematic of how we're going to be conducting ourselves, since, as Carolyn again put it, we are paying you. So I would imagine all of us would request more attention and respect in terms of how you're interrelating with us. I took notes, Eric, of your presentation this evening. I'm not sure all of the subjects are or will be germane to what the master plan is to be all about, especially the first category, employment, where people work, etc. I'm not sure how that will fit in. That requires further discussion. The other subjects may, to some extent, be duplicative of data that already exists by virtue of FinCom and Capcom's efforts. So I would, again this evening, suggest that we try to collaborate. Not this evening, I don't want to take the time this evening to do that, but I would request that you contact me so we can begin that.
Well, there's a lot to detangle there. Kristen, I don't know if you want to speak to the lines of communication or if you want me to.
Sure, and Jack and I spoke about this as well. And I think what we wanted to talk about as part of the committee structure and how we do things, certainly want to talk about how we want to be asking questions and outreach to the committee and the consultant and making sure that all our questions, I mean, we want to know together, all of us, what we have for questions as well as what those answers are. So Jack and I spoke a little bit before this meeting just to try to agree that we want to talk about it. And we don't need to decide now, but I think there needs to be a central kind of flowing of questions and answers so the committee can benefit overall from that dialogue. But overall, I would agree that the FinCom and all of you that have worked so much on all of that base data for Hamilton and have done such a great job presenting to us as residents, all of that information is critically important for Eric to be aware of. So I think we as a committee certainly should talk about how we want to relay that information. I think it's important to do. But in terms of, I don't want to start on the wrong foot of, we emails and didn't contact. I think it's for us to decide in general, the committee structure, how we want to be communicating. And so, I don't know, I guess that's where we are.
Right, which you can do on your own. I would just advise the committee that every time an individual contacts us, that's time out of your budget. I mean, if we're making constant one-on-one answering queries or following up, that's time out of your budget. That comes out of your budget. That's time we're putting in.
Carolyn, excuse me. Excuse me, Carolyn.
Data points,
I asked you for the contact information for Eric. How many seconds would it have taken you to respond?
I apologize for that, but I had a grant due on Friday and then a plane to take to Florida because I'm currently on vacation. That's where I've been all week. So I'm taking time out of my vacation to attend this meeting. But if there is data, what we do when we go through, and we have this on our agenda tonight, the research and data phase, if there is data pertinent to these sections, that's one role that we have assigned to Patrick, and I need to confer with him. We need to amass that data so that we have it in one place, all of us. On our end, the research and data process for each potential chapter, known chapter, we are basically creating catalogs of data. That's what we do. Where are our data sources? What are those data sources telling us? And then we decide whether it's relevant. It may not seem relevant, something like where do Hamilton residents commute to? But in a way, it's actually very relevant. It tells us where housing should be built, where transportation may be congested. So it may not be readily apparent why we need to know some data that we need to know, but that's why we create catalogs of data. And the idea being that when we're done with the plan and all of this is digested into a final plan, you will have a set of data that you can refer to, whether it be for other plans or for grant applications or whatever the town needs to use it for. So that's kind of the point of the data and research phase. It's not just for the master plan, but it's also just to understand the full situation of the town as it is.
If I might, I'd like to see if we can address the structural communication issue, because that's important. We don't want to be at cross purposes or confusing the consultant or ourselves. So I think it makes sense that we designate either the co-chairs or the chair as the funnel. We put questions to Carolyn or Eric or other staff so that there's a clearinghouse for that information. And then it comes back in a form that gets distributed to the group as appropriate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Can I make a suggestion? This is a municipal contract. The typical process is that the request for information goes through the municipal participant. That would be me. That's why I'm here. That way, I'm the storing house. I have the ability, because I'm not a voting member, I have the ability to provide everybody with the information, and it's not in a deliberation mode. So that helps me to get around some of the open meeting law kinds of things. I fully expect that if Town Manager Domolowitz were here, he would be asking that we have this process through myself as the process.
Patrick, I think since I had copied you on those torrid emails, you reached out to Eric and asked him to contact me. Did you not?
Yes, sir, I did.
And he has not complied with your request.
Well, on that note, though, we're the prime contractor for that, so the question would come through me. I mean, Eric can be copied, but I need to be on that as well, since we are the prime contractor for the work. That's just typically how it works.
Okay, so let's see if we can get this process straight. So members of the steering committee feed their questions through either the chair or the co-chair or vice chair, that then go to Patrick, then go to Caroline. Is that the appropriate process?
No, I think it needs to go. Kristen and I have agreed that any communication with one of us should be through to both of us, because we back each other up. We should both be aware of what activity is happening.
Right,
and then we will make the assumption that it runs through. We will then between us, we will determine how it then goes through Patrick to Caroline for disbursement.
Yeah.
Can I just make a suggestion for efficiency's sake? I heard someone along the way say that they'll compile, I think Patrick, you said this, compile what you receive and then spit it back out to the committee. And so if that's the case, if the entire committee is going to see whatever it is, the question and the answer anyway, I would suggest potentially just forwarding things that we want to communicate or ask our consultants to Patrick, so that we don't have all these multiple steps and I can just see someone's inbox is, full and they don't get to it, or, it gets lost in the junk. I feel like if we just send it right to Patrick and then he makes sure the entire committee sees it, that might be a more efficient way of communication instead of doing the chairs, then Patrick, then it just takes one step out of kind of a long process.
What happens after we're copied? The point is that Kristen and I needed to know what's going on.
Jack, into the microphone.
Sorry. Kristen and I need to know what's going on. We need to be advised of what the flow is. And so it may be that if Patrick is there, but we may have another idea. Kristen and I haven't discussed this yet, obviously. And I think ultimately it is just going to go through Patrick. But I think we need to know what's happening. Otherwise, we're going to be pretty useless.
Yeah, and I don't think we have to make this too complex. We may have questions that come up during this process that we can compile during our meeting. So we'll have a list of questions. If during the times that we're not meeting, we have a question that they can go to the chair and vice chair, and they can compile a list rather than, this, as you said, doing dozens and dozens of emails on individual questions. We can, send them a list of questions so that it doesn't become a burden to everybody involved. This will evolve over time, so we may end up with some other method of communicating, But I think for now, let's try that, so we are coordinating amongst ourselves and through Caroline to the sub-consultants and her team. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it will evolve. But
Okay. I'd like to go back to Eric. And Eric, I'm glad you're here, because I think from my standpoint, I'm really looking forward to the economic analysis strengths that you bring to this process. I think, however, you might be reading from the original RFP response from Weston and Sampson. Their revised approach deleted the business development focus of downtown, and well, Caroline, you may be collecting that information on transportation and sort of downtown information and economic activities. That section was deleted out of the revised scope of services. So, and to refocus Eric's time and effort on the economic impact analysis. And there, as Eric identified, there are two component pieces to that, is the detailed assessment of the town's current and projected cost of school and town operations and sources of current and projected revenues. That's going to be very relevant early on in our discussions, so I'm looking forward to that piece being started, and you're interfacing with David Wanger of the FinCom. The second part, and I think is equally as important and comes much later, is when we develop the proposed solutions or programs or policies, is that Eric and others will be doing an economic cost-benefit analysis to see what the potential impact is of the recommendations that come out of both the public process as well as the research and analysis that you guys are doing. So I think from my perspective, and I think from other people on this board, I can't speak for them, they'll have other opinions, that's where we want the time and effort focused, not a general look at the downtown and, you know, what are the businesses that are there and are people communicating back and forth. That's a nice to know, but it's not a critical need to know for our deliberations.
Yeah, and just
Eric, can we take that or do you want me?
Nope, that's fine. Just to clarify on that, I apologize if there's any confusion. I thought when Kristen asked about the economic development piece, it was more about the sort of chapter itself. I do have in addition to the housing and the economic development components, there is a whole section of our scope that deals with exactly what you were just describing. So that is part of it. I just didn't mention that as part of the chapter itself, but I know that's important to the town. It was in the town's original RFP and it was part of our response, so.
Right, and I just want to make sure you understand that that has been deleted.
It was deleted. It was deleted, was it?
Yes. If you looked at the revised scope of services, we had a long discussion about where the focus should be before the contract was awarded. That was with the town manager, Patrick, myself, Tim Olson,
Russ Stevens.
And the revised scope came back from Weston and Sampson with that section essentially deleted because we didn't want to invest the time or energy on a fairly generic analysis that didn't really provide, from our perspective, of value. So I think this conversation is really valuable. I think it's a good thing we are having this conversation now because we want to make sure that our expectations meet what your expectations are so that we don't get down the road and there's a real mismatch and everybody's going, wait a minute, that wasn't what we were supposed to be doing. And so I hope Caroline and Eric, you're clear on that, or you have an alternate viewpoint, or you want to push back, which is fine.
No, I think we're in agreement. I do think that just to make comp plan sort of consistent, certainly with the expectations of what a comp plan is, we're going to have to touch that area a little bit. But I certainly was at the conversation where we talked about the financial aspects of the town and how important that is. And so that was factored in. We know that. And there may be other constraints. That's why it's important to get the FinCom's any analysis that they have out as quickly as possible, so Eric and I can take a look at it. There may be other constraints to the town's growth that we need to consider: water resources, wastewater. There are other factors, so that's why we need as much data out as possible, as soon as possible, so that we can start cross-referencing everything that we have and we know, and identify where gaps are that we need to research further. But no, I think we're on the same page. We're just saying it differently.
I think the critical point to take from this is that the FinCom and CapCon are working on exactly those issues now, and Eric should be a part of that discussion. The point is to coordinate, I think, what is going on, and that's the critical part of it, so we don't spend a lot of time spinning wheels here. That's what it essentially comes down to, if I may.
Jack, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Carolyn, in your experience, what is the typical way that this information might be shared between, I would imagine that other FinComs might have wanted to share this kind of information with your subcontractors like this. So what is the typical method for sharing that information?
Just via email. If you have reports, presentations, if you could send them to Patrick for his review to make sure it's the appropriate information for us to have. That would be the normal protocol. We usually put a request for information to the town. We're not quite done compiling all of our research needs. So where we can't pull things off, we'll go online. If something's online, we'll get it. If there's GIS data, we'll get it. But there may be other things that we can't get, and we'll go to Patrick and we'll say, do you have this, this, and this? But if there are things that your committees, FinCom or other, have produced, obviously we don't know what we don't know. So yeah, you'll have to send it on if you know it exists and you think it would be useful to the process through Patrick.
Thank you.
I think that the main point here, the main point here is that Eric at this point is a blank slate as far as the town is concerned, I'm assuming. And I think that to get ourselves all on the same page, we need to get in the same room for some period of time to discuss the inputs is what it comes down to. It's more than just an email exchange. I think it's a familiarization so that we have a general understanding of what the efforts are underway at this point and where the potentials lie. Eric may have another idea that he throws out from his experience, that he's looking at something in a way that we aren't looking at it. But I think the point in the end is that we do need to coordinate here, and that's not going to be done on email. It's going to, the initial needs to be an understanding between the parties that as to where we are and where we think we're going and what the inputs need to be in order to fully evaluate that. Is that fair?
Yes, it's fair. I'm getting a little confused. I'll be happy to attempt to assemble and provide to Patrick what I understand FinCom and CapCom have been assembling, but I think Jack makes a very relevant point. At some stage of this sharing, there'll need to be discussion, and it's awkward to do so electronically. So I would be supportive of steps along the route here to collaboration, providing Patrick with the information. Jack, if you think that's the appropriate course to take. Patrick, you decide whether it's relevant to the undertaking. Then perhaps you might share with the entire committee what you have sent along to the consultant, and thereafter, Jack, perhaps we can arrange some kind of interpersonal gathering of those of us who want to engage in the fiscal type discussion.
So I would agree, and I think it's important to get the data and digest the data, and so for all of us, as well as the consultant. And then, I think this piece alone is a topic for a whole meeting to discuss. So I think getting the data, having all of us digest it so we can all come to the meeting with informed questions, I think is good. And then one of our subsequent meetings coming up, I'm sure Eric and Caroline, when they start putting data together, digesting it, then we can have that really meaty discussion about a really important topic.
That sounds good.
So, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I just had a quick question just about the scope of the economic development analysis, and maybe this is a question for the committee as well. But just in terms of, the topics that you covered, I was curious whether there's a standard process for having like a natural capital asset analysis involved in that, just because I do think there's a lot of value in that when we look at the different land uses and economic value generated by natural capital over time, whether that's something that's included.
That's a good question. I agree.
I'm sorry, but would you be able to define natural capital? Do you mean the open space and kind of those types of resources that are in the community today?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, natural capital being like land resources, water resources, natural habitat, all of the kind of ecosystem services that are generated by that natural capital. Whether we're talking about, recreational value, biodiversity value, economic value, there's a lot of economic value that's generated by all of that.
I also think it's important to look at, how open spaces add value. They may not themselves be revenue, but how they create the things next to them, they give them even more revenue, just that the associations with those type of spaces and amenities and how that adds to other things that may actually generate more value because they exist, kind of just value added to things that might not necessarily create value themselves, I think is an important narrative.
Exactly, yeah, like even linking it to the kind of real estate value, all of that is absolutely interconnected.
Excellent.
Yep.
I have a question, and this goes to Caroline, and I don't know if it came through the scope or it's in your wheelhouse to answer this at this point in time, but one of the pressing questions, and it gets sort of a follow-on question to land usage and land preservation. One of the big questions in this town is actually how much land do we have that's under permanent protection from all entities, nonprofits, town, state, trustees of reservations, Greenbelt, and what is in fact already built, so that we have a picture of what actually is left for potential development and where that might be. Otherwise, I'm not sure how we can have an informed discussion on both preservation of open space and development of our land resources, since that's the only thing that we have that we can use to produce additional revenues to support town services.
So as part of a normal master planning process, you do what's called a build-out analysis, which I'm sure you're familiar with it, which you look at your zoning and you see what is built and what is possible to be built under your current zoning. And so there creates, a certain amount of potential there. In Hamilton's case, and we've had this discussion with our sustainability staff, because this is obviously relevant to that section, really looking at the parcel database, seeing what is in conservation, understanding, and it may take some pulling of deeds to understand the nature of that conservation, whether it's permanently conserved or whether it's there's some conditions to it. That's a little bit beyond the master planning scope, but if it's not too detailed, it might be something that we can address, particularly for like estate lots or large tracts of land, where that could be very, very relevant. If you have a large tract of land and it has a conservation easement, but it's not a permanent conservation easement, then you've got something that has potential for development down the road. And you probably want to know about that.
Yeah, and you're probably talking about Chapter 60.
61.
That's not permanently protected.
Correct.
Right. That's easily gotten from the assessor. That certainly would help, but that is potentially developable land. I think I'm not, from my perspective, looking for a parcel by parcel analysis, but it certainly would be helpful for the general public, and I think certainly as a member of the planning board, is to have somebody provide an objective, independent inventory of the land that we do have and what is protected and what's not protected and what's available for development, because there's numbers all over the place, and it would be nice to have. One of the goals I hope for the master plan is to establish an objective database so that we have from Weston and Sampson somebody providing us with data that has been verified by an independent outside source that we can then use to have an informed, intelligent discussion about how do we preserve, how do we develop, and where and when do we do that?
Yeah, so that, I think that is part of our analysis. And, this can be done, as Sydney just mentioned, it can be done by on just Mass GIS with the layers that we already have. Part of the consideration for this group to discuss too is whether your existing zoning categories are serving the town. Are there areas that maybe need changes of uses, expansion of uses, adjustments to density, adjustments to height? Those are all questions that come to bear when we start looking at what is your existing development capacity. Where do you have wiggle room? Where are the areas that you are critical conservation areas, whether they're ecologically sensitive or, as you've already mentioned, they're contributing value in other ways? This is all part of a broader conversation. I mean, I hope I'm getting to your question.
Yep. No, I understand that part. I was just looking for to make sure we had a real solid inventory of what is open, what's preserved, protected, and what's open for development. But
yes,
thank you.
I think that builds on something that we talked about last week, which is, throughout this process, part of our goal as a committee, it sounds like, is to educate the town on what's on the facts, because I think there's a lot of opinions and ideas that aren't necessarily always true. And I think it would be really helpful to have that list where we can say, yes, development is great, but here's in reality where it can happen, where it can't, what's protected, what's not. I'm not sure that any of us knows that. So I think that'll be really useful in the kind of level setting and education part of this effort.
I think we don't want to get too deep in the weeds in this. We don't want to bog way down because this is a huge topic, obviously. And I think we've got a general feeling for where it is, and there will be certain projects that we're going to have to address quickly at some point because they're up for grabs, and others that are more theoretical, more visionary, things of that nature. But I don't think we want to take up too much more time. Carolyn, what other in your I think we're in your research and data phase now, are we not?
Sounds like it. So as I said, we have, for each proposed section, or what we think are proposed sections, we start compiling demographic data. So for example, Eric does a lot of the economic data, land use data, zoning layers. For the integrated water resource plan, we have that set of data. It's basically like cataloged. One thing I had mentioned to Kristen in a conversation is that, and I see other towns starting to use this, is compiling a separate product from the master plan called a data book. And what it is just something that, it's just basically that catalog of data. Everything that is pulled from the census, pulled from your land use, your economic data. It can be in database format, it can be in infographic format. Ideally, it's something that the town would update periodically so that you can see any trends that are happening. So that's kind of where we're going with it right now. So hopefully, let's see, we're in July. So hopefully within the next month, we'll be able to share what that looks like. with you, so you can kind of see where I'm going with it.
I think the critical thing there is going to be for you to go through that exercise, and then we'll troubleshoot it, and apply some local knowledge to it, and see how realistic some of this stuff really is, because, and put the priorities on it, if you will.
Definitely.
What else is on the agenda for talking to Caroline about? Jack?
I think that I believe is it, Carolina. What else do you have that is hot? Because Emil's concept, I'm not sure is a topic that we're going to be discussing, but I'm not sure that Western and Sampson is necessarily wants to sit in on that, or what your feeling is on that.
Jack, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
There's another part of what Carolyn is on the agenda for this evening, community engagement strategy.
Yeah, and it's up to you. That is, I sent this on. That's a really rudimentary community engagement strategy, but we decided to send it on just so you can kind of see where we're going with that. Ideally, it would be a finished product before we go to a public launch that spells out the committee's value system in terms of the community engagement process, some of the outputs that you're hoping to get out of the community process, and spells out the methodology by which we're going to try and engage the community. And, we can tweak it as we go along, but just know that eventually, ideally, it's a public-facing document that the people would be able to pick up and know that they're being included in the process.
Caroline, will that include a schedule of the rollout of the public participation process? And I ask that question because I'd like to know where we are, as the participant on the local level, where that's going, but also where we can plug in local knowledge, information, and opportunities for Weston and Sampson to engage with the public in existing scheduled events.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. We've already talked about a couple of events, so we can plug those in and send them on to Patrick. Just know it's a draft, and if you have comments, feel free to make them through the lines of communication, so that we can make this really reflective of the community. And it's fairly generic right now, so it does need that sort of local touch on it.
Well, and I think we talked about trying to do some sort of kickoff in September, October, and also trying to align with the Shop Local Day, just to get the word out of just kind of we're doing this, and what is a master plan to the public. I know we talked about that at the first or second meeting, I think.
Do we have the date of that Shop Local event? Is it happening?
Yes, it is happening. They haven't nailed down the date. They're talking currently September 18th, which is a Saturday. It will be an event that engages all the merchants downtown, and hopefully a large majority of citizens will be attending. And that's based on a grant from the Mass Office of Business Development to promote downtown businesses, as well as the Hamilton Development Corporation is supporting that. So that's definitely coming, and that's the tentative date.
I think we should use that as our tentative target for our first public launch.
We talked about having a table there and have at least 2 or 3 people. I think it helped full time.
Yeah, it would just help, certainly from, I think, the steering committee's perspective, if you could lay out sort of, and maybe you've done this and maybe I'm just being obtuse, that the schedule of events and how all this process is flowing. Because right now, for me, I'm getting bits and pieces of it, but I'm not getting, and maybe there was the Gantt chart in the original proposal, and maybe you can do an adaptation or an update of that, just and present that back to us, given what you now know about us, the town, and your own resource scheduling, just so we have sort of a visual, we can see how this is going to flow and where particular events, data gathering, public events, further analysis, policy development, whatever those things are, I think that would
Yeah,
be.
so that timetable needs to be completely redone. And so what we do need is a whole new table with milestones, with proposed workshop dates, because it's going to require a bit of work from each of you to encourage participation. We may have to schedule a future meeting I mean, I can put the bones out there, but I need your help to put flesh on the bones. And so we probably need to schedule some time at a future meeting. I'll refine the plan with Sydney and Ashley and see if we can get as much detail, logical detail on a revised timetable. And then maybe we can talk about it at a future agenda and we can start really building out that plan for engagement.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a lot of things. There's going to be, hanging of posters, handing out postcards, to the degree that the committee can help support those efforts. We're just going to have a better engagement process.
One of the things that I'd like to understand from you guys in terms of all the chapters and elements of just the topics. I mean, the first kickoff kind of public meeting is kind of like everything of overview, but then we have to really get into, cultural and natural resources and economic development and have specific targeted conversations and discussions. So if you guys can think about when those plug in, just even a draft, because I think there's also a lot of relevant things that are going on in Hamilton that may push a certain topic to be in a different location just because it's more relevant time-wise. And then this committee can help flush out that kind of, if over 18 months, these things are happening, maybe natural resources is better on a certain other thing because there's relevant things happening in Hamilton or the region that directly are at the front of people's minds that it makes sense to coordinate. I mean, if Ipswich River Watershed is having a big thing, everyone's thinking about water, maybe that month is a time to think about water. Or, just try to figure out kind of what external forces help us get people to answer all these questions. It might be helpful. So if you want to try to plug in what you think, and then we can talk with you to kind of rearrange what might actually make the most sense, that would be helpful, at least in my perspective.
Yeah, I think we need to do that in person and create that path, and then we can always make course corrections as we go along to the extent that we need to fine tune.
I agree, and I actually think that maybe we should be looking at this for the August meeting, because if we're talking about a launch in September, we at least want to get that front end stuff pretty well settled, even if we have to tweak things later on.
And I was just going to share, I think others probably saw this as well, but on one of our town Facebook groups, there was actually a post and about 70 plus comments related to the master plan process. So word is out there. People are talking about it. And so I think we should definitely take advantage of that and make sure that we're harnessing that energy and excitement in a positive way to help us with this process. So yeah, the sooner the better. September will be here before we know it.
Well, that's great to hear. Hopefully they were all good comments. I think with the Shop
positive.
Local event, at least from my memory, it was just to have some sort of some of us there, just like there is a master plan, but have something like a pamphlet for the actual event that we'll be having, like a separate event, I think we talked about. So that not being like September 18th, the event, but just kind of getting buzz for whatever event we choose. So whether it's September or early October.
Right, and then because graphics and that sort of thing takes a little bit of production time on our part, maybe a couple of weeks. So we want to know what sort of media we want at each of these events.
So should we plan on the August 12th meeting being like a working meeting, and perhaps, Carolyn, you can come in person? Is that what we're...
I think that's fine. Let me just, I don't see why not. Is it the 12th? Yeah, okay, you're right.
So then with that, I don't think we necessarily need RKG, but I'd just like to know, just make sure that, you and Eric are coordinating with whatever that however it lines up.
Yeah. Sydney will be on vacation, and I don't think we need Eric at that meeting, but I can bring Ashley or somebody with me if I need somebody, which I'm not so sure I do. If we want to just have like a, an intense work session on really hashing out some of these dates, I think that's best done in person for sure.
Carolyn, may I ask a question about billing? That is, I note that both you and Eric have associates in attendance this evening, and you mentioned Sydney may not be available, and you may ask someone else, or you may come by yourself. How do you account for the time of both Eric's associate and yours if they're present? Are they billed, quote unquote, separately?
So how we bill it is hourly. So for example, Sydney fills a timesheet out, I fill a timesheet out, at least on Weston and Sampson's end. And so if Sydney spends an hour at a meeting, she bills for an hour at a meeting. Likewise for me. If Sydney's not at a meeting, she doesn't bill for that meeting. Is that answering your question?
It does. We, of course, have an interest in getting the full extent of the value of your services, but we're reliant upon your judgment or Eric's judgment as to whether or not an associate is present and the associate's time is to be charged against the $150,000. So what are the considerations that you use as to whether or not you'd have an associate present?
For me, it's, for example, Sydney serves as somebody, she takes notes, so I can engage in conversation, and she can remind me of what, other people have said and keep it before me. If I can't bring anybody in, that's an extra burden on me, and it does make it a little harder, but it's doable. So does that get to your question?
Well, I would invite comment from other committee members, but from my viewpoint, I would ask you to be judicious in terms of the time allocation.
Since you invited the comment, having been both on the purchase side and the consulting side, there's a dynamic that goes on, as you know. The client, that's us, will be pushing for more than was in the scope of services, and the consultant will be looking to husband those resources as carefully as possible. So I'm not so much worried about who's in what meeting. I'm more worried about the actual product we get, and if it's not satisfactory, then they're going to have to figure out how to make that correction or addition or deletion. So I think they have to manage their own resources as opposed to us doing that for them. And that's how it's always worked for me.
Well,
I appreciate the comment, and I would appreciate, you guys being judicious with all of your work, but, fully well knowing that the people on the meeting are the people doing the work. And if Sydney's not on the meeting, she's going to have to watch the meeting anyway to figure out whatever it is that she's going to be doing. So I think we're going to pay for her at the meeting or pay for her to watch the meeting anyway, if she's critical to whatever product is coming out of that meeting. So, in terms of having people on that aren't going to be doing it, she might be taking notes on the meeting, but then she's actually listening to us and understanding who we are, what we're looking for, and then doing something along with you, Carol. And I assume that's the case. So I guess I appreciate, just, thinking of the budget when you have people on the meeting, but I appreciate the need to hear all of us if for those that are going to embark on the work.
Okay. Well, I don't want to
We good, Jack?
waste the budget belaboring the point. It sounds fine.
Sorry, say again?
She said that was okay.
Are we good on the
Okay.
agenda in terms of Weston and in terms of the agenda with Weston and Sampson, are we on schedule here? Because we've got another hour and we've got a lot to talk
Yeah,
about.
I think if Carolyn has any other considerations, I think that's, what have you got, Carolyn? Anything else? Or, because I think we're otherwise going to go just into the visioning process here.
So I would ask both Eric and Caroline, you guys both mentioned that you have a list of data points that you need from us. The sooner you can get that to us, the better we can coordinate whatever that data is. I mean, as mentioned by David, that there's a lot of stuff from FinCom that is put together data, and hopefully, you guys, that we can get that and send it along to you. But if there's any specific points, if you can get us those points so we can start working as a committee to getting that information for you in this data phase, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Even if it's not a complete list, but if it's, a working list of these are some things I need, at this point, and then maybe you need more stuff, but just anything that you guys can send to us as to local data points that you're looking for to fit in with the rest of the picture.
Will do. Sounds good. All right. So did you all want to talk about the visioning on your own? Are you saying that you want to do that on your own and you don't want us as consultants there? Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Do you think it would be valuable for you, Carolyn, to be exposed to that discussion, or would you like to get back to your vacation? I'm certainly sympathetic to the sacrifice.
It's totally up to you. I did look at the outline that was provided, and I love it. I think it's great. I mean, I only have positive things to say about it. It's a matter if you want me to. I'm sure Eric doesn't need to listen to it. I'm happy to stay on if you feel like that's of value.
Well, I'm going to echo David's comment. I think we would be burning time that's not useful. We've got a lot of discussion we want to be talking about and figure out just where we are and where we're going. I think we can summarize that in a document that Emil will put together, no doubt, and forward that to Caroline and other people.
I think, Caroline, this comes under the general heading of all of us kind of getting a feel for ourselves and our interests, as it were, in this. So it's probably not useful for you necessarily to observe that. It's
okay.
All right.
Good. Well, as long as we have
Jack, just
good
one
communication, I'm happy with that. I will do whatever you need me to do.
Hang on one second.
Yeah, don't go on vacation yet. I just have one quick question in regard. This is Emil Dahlquist. In regard to one of the reasons some of this information was generated was I, for one, am not that clear in terms of how proactive we're supposed to be in terms of, let's just look at phase one, the visioning part of the presentation. And the data collection is the data collection. I can understand that. But in terms of driving or shaping or forming the ultimate presentation, is that going to come out of your office? Or is that something that we need to do, and then we're going to look at it and react to it? Or do you want us to generate something?
Well, I'm open-minded. Typically, our office generates the product, and the review committee reviews it and gives feedback or says, they like it, they don't like this part. It's a critical analysis. But I'm open-minded. I mean, I leave it to you as the sort of steering body of this. If you want to take a greater lead, that's fine. It's just that's atypical, but I'm open to it, however you want to work it.
Yeah, I'm not advocating that especially, but I'm just see time going by and that we need to get something done if we're going to begin this presentation in September. There's a lot of work to do, as you know. And, whatever we can do to help out or would be very useful from our standpoint. If you give us an assignment, we would like this information by this date would be very useful.
I do think ultimately that what we're looking for, though, is really a synthesis of what the citizens of Hamilton want to end up with in the end.
Yeah.
And that's going to take professional input on the technical aspects of it, but the actual vision of it should be reflective of some sort of synthesis of Hamilton's opinion. And I may personally have a very different opinion of how I would like to see Hamilton go versus other people who have also live here and mine is no more valuable or less valuable than anybody
Right.
else's. So
Yeah.
I think what we have to do is put our effort into discerning how people view this, and not as Weston and Sampson would necessarily view it. I guess that's would be my input on that. Does that sound reasonable? Or?
Yeah, I was thinking the process more than the content at this stage. You know, who's going to sort of lay out the detail on how this gets rolled out, and that is important, obviously.
That's going to be Weston and Sampson. Take a look at the previous master plan. The consultant drove that process. There were over 70 people involved, 10 subcommittees, and they were, but they were working in concert with the consultant, but at the direction saying, okay, here's what's coming next, and here's how we need your input, assistance, et cetera, to organize, execute, inform.
I think of the forming, but what happened with the last time was it got put on the shelf and never looked at again, so.
Well, I would argue strongly against that viewpoint, Jack, because I
See,
spent the
there's the
last.
opinion differentials in here.
Well,
so.
yeah, but except I'm the one who's been on the planning board for 16 years implementing the recommendations of that master plan. And I can tell you, when I started out, I had hair and it had color. So.
I didn't.
So I would take great exception to that, as well as dozens of people that sacrificed hundreds of hours on the planning board to make specific recommendations come to life. So I'd be careful about the generalizations you make.
I make that representation, Rick, as you recall, you and I were partners on the affordable housing, and we have not accomplished diddly squat in affordable housing in the intervening time. So it's an unfortunate situation, so.
Yeah, but that's the purview of another organization in town, and was in fact the creation of the master plan. The Affordable Housing Committee was specifically recommended, created, and eventually involved in the Affordable Housing Trust.
We're not gonna thrash this thing through at this point.
Can I?
So back to email's comment, I just wanted to to support the visioning process and kind of making sure that we or you aren't kind of front loading, what are our goals too soon, and letting really the public, us to understand that the public and the public process. And I think that's a good topic for the next meeting when we talk about that overall outline with you.
Good. Okay, so, Caroline, are you happy with seeing what, as
Can I-
far as?
can I
Oh,
just-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I guess I have a little, I hear everyone, and Carolyn included, saying that it possibly makes sense for Eric and his associate to depart at this time as we move towards talking about the next steps. I'm a little concerned about, I guess I have a little bit of a different point of view around Caroline leaving, my understanding is what Rick just said is that that in the past, the consultant has really.
No, no. What I was speaking about was the consultants has a product around, and Caroline, you can correct me, it's probably about 12 topic areas: data collection, policy analysis, economic analysis, recommendations, public participation process. She doesn't create the vision for us.
Understood. I guess my concern is, and I will defer to the committee, obviously, whatever, but I guess I could imagine that there's value in Carolyn hearing our discussion around vision, because it seems, but maybe not. But I just wanted to move the process forward, whatever we're doing next.
Right, I would
in the
agree. I
meeting.
think we're spending more time deciding whose purview a certain issue is, and I think that Carolyn is the expert on this, and so I also would like to have her input, and let's talk about how are we going to develop a vision. Maybe that's the next subject we should talk about, and I guess I would agree, Carolyn, you could help us on that, since most of us are novices to this process.
Do we want to put it to a vote?
Yeah, I think
Do I have a motion?
I'd like to do that.
We have a motion. Somebody want to make a motion?
Can I make or ask a clarifying question? So my understanding of this agenda item was to agree as a committee what our vision is for the like structure of the document, not necessarily like the content, and the approach. And so it's not content where, you know, Carolyn is the expert. It's just sort of like a restructuring of the document, making it more user-friendly. And so I feel like if we can just come to consensus as a committee on what we think that looks like, we can share that with Carolyn, and then we can start talking about the content. Is that understanding correct? Is it more about structure?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and that's fine. I just like to move forward with the agenda. Let's move forward.
Yeah.
But I think also, as we discuss this, Carolyn, we've hired her to be our consultant. She's the expert. So I don't see any downside to having her assist us in that. And I agree. Let's move forward. Let's start doing it and work collaboratively. And that way, we will be introduced to Carolyn's approach as well, because right now I think we're sort of just foundering a little bit because we don't know what Carolyn's approach is. So let's talk about ours and hers and discuss which might be the most advantageous.
Can we do a consensus of the group which they'd like to do? Because we seem to have different opinions changing by the minute. And I'd like to either get Caroline off or have Caroline participate, but we're just going around in circles on this. So let's start with Emil. What do you want to do?
You want a motion?
No, I want to know,
motion
I'm
and a
doing
vote.
I'm doing
I
a
wanna have a motion and
consent,
a
I'd
vote.
like to just get a consensus.
Rick, let's have a motion and a vote.
If you want to just go around the table, do a quick comment. Ultimately, I'd like Carolyn's input on what we're talking about, but this effort, what I wrote here was one approach that, to me anyway, kind of represents a new way to look at a master plan that begins really with not with kind of the dry things of land use and economic development, all necessary and important, and will fill out the document, but to engage people, to get them interested in participating, you have to give them something that is relatable. And relatable is really going to be spatial dimensions, things that they see, what drew them to Hamilton in the first place, what do they like about the place. And that to me is, because I'm just looking at the phase one, the visioning
Hang
part
on
of it.
1 minute.
I'm sorry, I'm going
I
on.
would suggest that Eric and his associate depart at this stage and that Carolyn.
You want me to make a motion? You want to make a motion?
Second,
Okay, well,
for Eric to depart.
Yes,
I second that motion.
okay. All
Thank
in
you,
favor
Eric
that Eric
and
should
Chris.
depart now.
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah,
Aye.
aye.
Okay. Carolyn, do I have a motion that Carolyn would stay and listen to our discussion of Emil's?
I'll make a motion.
contribute.
Yeah. I'll make a
And-
motion that Carolyn participate in this portion of the discussion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed?
Those opposed?
Okay. The ayes have it.
No, wait a minute, can't do that, you have to do the other opposed, you can't just declare that.
We have opposed.
How many are voting?
Are you opposed?
I am opposed.
There's two.
Okay, there's
Right, and there are
there's
1,
two,
2, 3, 4,
three.
5.
I voted aye.
Okay,
I voted yes.
Aye.
there.
Aye. 6 in favor.
Okay, so we should.
Okay.
Okay.
So Carolyn, thank you very much. If you
Yeah.
can stay, excellent. That's going to, we're going to take a little more of your vacation then.
Well, Okay, so what?
Okay,
what should we
Emil
talk
has the floor.
Do you mind if I just weigh in for a second for what it's worth?
Sure.
May I ask what came out of your discussion on your mission statement as a group?
It's still in process.
Yeah,
In
it is
process?
still in process. That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Well,
We have a meeting scheduled for the 29th that we're going to be continuing discussion. We talked a lot about committee procedure at the last meeting.
Okay.
Not as much on the
Well,
mission.
And I can help with this a little bit, or you can do it on your own. It may be helpful when you have your mission statement to think about a few principles that you want to apply as a committee to this process. So it's not just your overall purpose, but it's sort of guiding principles that you guys can agree on. It doesn't have to be a lot, could be 5 maybe, about how you want to approach your master planning process. I don't want to belabor your work, but it might help you if you had, essentially, I'm going to call them guiding principles, but they're sort of guideposts, ground rules as to, I don't know what the word is, but we're looking at some higher level value systems that you want to apply to this. So your mission statement illustrates your sense of purpose, but guiding principles can talk and speak to your process. So as you're debating different issues, what is the overall value system that you're going to measure your actions as a group on? So, valuing community vision, for example, working to get a diverse cross-section of your community. Another thing could be to balance out economic assets with natural and ecological assets. I don't know what those things are, but they might be, that might be a separate discussion that you don't need me at, and it might help clarify your approach.
Yeah.
Just about.
There is a section on guiding principles here.
Yeah.
And I think what we have on the agenda is going through Emil's visioning. And I think if you take that in, and then we will back up at some point, probably on the, next August meeting when you're in attendance, and we can address whatever differences there may be that are not a part of what we're doing this evening.
Mr. Chairman, let me, with respect, maybe we ought to have this as an internal discussion. I don't like, it clearly may get voted down. We may reject everything. So we're just sort of wasting Caroline's time. So maybe we ought to settle on this as a committee. Is this useful or not? And, and then.
Yours is useful, or?
Yes.
Or we should listen to the guiding principles first?
No, whether what I was asked to talk about today as an agenda item is.
That's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda, but whether it's useful to have Caroline here or whether we want to handle this internally, honestly, we could go either way on that from my standpoint.
My only feeling is that if we go through this discussion, then she'll have a background of what, the way we're looking at it, and then she can comment accordingly in her next.
Well,
Can I add something? Just like the process that we're about to go down is you would walk us through kind of the vision for the reorganization of the outline. And so from my perspective, the value add that Caroline brings to that is based on her experience developing other master plans, does the revisioning that you have created fit with an output that would be useful, right?
and does Caroline have this document?
I do, thank you.
She does, I
So,
believe.
yeah, we
You sent it.
could,
Did you get that from Patrick this afternoon, Caroline?
Yes, I believe I did.
Okay.
so I think it would be helpful to go down this document and then have Caroline comment using her expertise. And we don't have to spend a lot of time in detail, but let's do that.
I'll go through it very quickly. Can
Yeah.
you just pass these down?
Is this the draft outline?
There are three different sheets.
I know.
And we don't have to go over all of it.
The fifth document that you're going
You
to
have
visit.
guiding
The
principles.
one that went out this afternoon.
Oh.
I looked at the response to the RFP, and I just tried to do a synopsis of it on one sheet of paper. It's the one that's titled Weston and Sampson Master Plan Scope of Work. And I just, again, just in reading that, primarily focusing really on the first part, the introduction, vision, goals, and policies. And I just was trying to glean from this, what is the structure of what it is that you're going to be doing or looking for as we go into public input. And so I don't know if you had a chance to read this, but whether you think this is fairly accurate. synopsis?
I haven't had a lot of
Haven't read
chance
it.
to read
Okay.
it.
All right, well, then the other thing is the other is proposed master plan elements where you listed, I think, 10 or 11 specific items to be covered in the master plan. So this is the sort of the first shot that we had of looking at what the content is going to be on the document. So with that in mind, what I was trying to do is look at this and try to put some structure to the visioning part of it, beginning with guiding principles. So on the sheet that is dated July 8, beginning in guiding principles.
Well, now I'm confused, Emil. I'm looking at the draft outline that you produced, which looks like you took her information and then put it in a context. Is that what we're talking about? Because now you're going to guiding principles, and I'm really confused here.
Well, we'll get there.
But tell me what should I be looking at?
What I'm doing is drawing your attention to the beginning of this, which is the Weston and Sampson Master Plan.
No, I've got all these documents. I've read all these documents. I'm trying to understand where you're going and what I should be looking at.
I'm just asking Caroline, is this fairly representative of what we're looking toward in terms of your deliverables on the
draft outline?
On the draft outline, yeah.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, now I'm with you. Yeah, I think that's a general outline for most master plans. You may be able to combine some of that. If you look at master plans 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they were extremely wordy, and they often look like, Bibles. They're very
Right.
thick.
Yeah, right.
That is not where master plans are going. People
that's
don't
exactly
have the
right.
attention span, and if you want a quick recipe for putting something on a shelf that will never get looked at, make it really big.
Yeah.
I like the elements here, and I think this is sort of the work that we'll be doing without getting too much detail. But I would think very carefully about the structure of it, and we don't have to. This doesn't have to be decided anytime soon. But you'll want a basic document that the public can refer to that is the master plan. But you're also going to want some standalone products. So like I said earlier, like a data book that is just data. That's just the basic metrics behind the master plan for people who want to know. Some people like details. You're also going to want something that is very easy to read. It could be an executive summary type document, or something that's very graphically strong, very heavy on infographics for your average person who just wants the gist of it. So you're gonna have these elements that you have on this outline. It just may not be one document with all of these elements. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and that's the way to do it. So just going to my sheet, the July 8th, beginning with guiding principles. This is really for us to discuss, and I listed 4 possible principles. There's a lot of room here for others, but this is a beginning. What I wanted to do is put something on a table we can react to, both with you and internally, to say, yes, this is where we'd like to go, or no, this is not where we'd like to go. So this was just an attempt to get the discussion moving a little bit. So I won't go overread all these guiding principles, but they are fairly general. But I think the important thing here is what are we trying to accomplish, and how are we going to go about doing it. And as to, I think, your mission statement, I think, for me anyway, that's not critical at this stage. I think that's going to evolve once we start seeing we're getting used to each other and seeing what the general feeling is amongst all the members. I think we're all going to be pretty close anyway. A couple of people wrote very good. Rick had a good mission statement, for example. One sentence, very short, and it's not particularly detailed, but it gives someone reading it a good idea of where this is heading and how it's going to happen.
Emil, can I just ask one clarifying question on that? With the mission statement, I kind of have two ideas in mind of what it's a mission statement for. Is it a mission statement for our work as a steering committee, or the mission statement more like a tagline for the master plan that the public would be seeing?
Yes.
Both. Yes.
It's a tagline.
It's a tagline.
It's a
Okay.
tagline of, it's really the headline.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's helpful. Thanks.
So the community discussion points, this was a reference that I looked up, something by Philip Hare when he wrote a book on saving place. But he came up with, for small towns, what are generally some of the questions that people might be interested in? And I just put this down because I thought it was useful in maybe working out a survey, using it as a guide. And again, Caroline, you may have your own list, but this was a way just to think about what we as a group should start to think about in putting together the background so we can put together some solid information for you to work with. So this was really, again, it can all be changed. It's just a way to begin this for us, at least it's useful for me. And then that leads into the agreeing on a vision on page 2. And this is where I'd like to kind of differ, and it sounds like you're familiar with more modern or more current contemporary master plans, but the idea is to kind of shift the emphasis on these, to more into how we value community resources, for example. This is something a lot of people are engaged or are interested in, again, as a way to introduce this whole master planning process and get them engaged. Most people might agree in what is memorable in Hamilton, but not always say what it takes to make it that way. That to me is kind of an important thing to start getting people to ask their own questions or come up with their own answers. And I could see putting something out there, why does Hamilton look the way it does, for example, and on a brochure, and so people are kind of drawn in that respect. So this is just, again, one particular way to look at this initial step of visioning process. So it's by, I like the use of the interrogatory statement because it draws people in. It's not challenging someone, it just asks a very simple question and gets them interested in engaging a little bit more. Getting to page 3, draft organization, and this is where I would like to introduce adding something to this. But the draft organization, I took your list of 10 or 11 what you call elements, the economic development, housing, and so forth. And I thought we could give it maybe a little bit more context and put it into 5 different categories. What we will protect, how we will grow, what we will provide. Just taking all of your individual elements and putting them together in the appropriate category. Again, just to kind of draw people in. So if they want to know what is Hamilton trying to protect, you have a list of things there, the natural resources, for example, and other things. So it's just a way of grouping rather than looking at a list of 12, you're looking at a list of 4 items, for example, relatively minor. But the one that I would like to introduce is the community character, because I think that's a very important one for this particular town. Under what we will protect. And again, it's primarily because of the visual appeal of the town. It's not so much about aesthetics, but it's thinking about what looks authentic. Why did a town develop this way? Was that originally at the crossroads, for example, and it sort of grew over time? What is it that makes a place look like a place that you enjoy being in? And it was always curious why a lot of people like to visit particular places, like a Nantucket, for example, and yet we don't build that way in our own towns. Why is that? And so I think that getting this to be kind of the leadoff or to draw people in, I think has a lot of value, because I think this will engage people. they all have their favorite part of Hamilton. They know, if, you know, when they talk to their friends about, know nothing about the town, what is it that they say to describe the place? And I think that's where, again, knowing the importance of getting or connecting people to this whole process is critical for some of us. And I think this is a good way to do it. So not make it too technical a document. And the idea of using a lot of graphics is very important. Sketches, critical. I noticed that was in your RFP response. And that's really important. And so that is one item I'd like to introduce, is the community character. It's something that I think has a lot of value to the master plan and also in drawing people into the process. And then on the last page, page 4, this is just an outline as I see it. Number 1, the introduction, which is similar to yours. We have an introduction, a plan summary, conditions and trends. This is where we have itemized or put in some of the data that you're collecting now. History of Hamilton, demographics, housing, economy. This is all data that you're putting together, I assume. And then community issues and concerns. This is where the surveys come in. This is where the key issues and concerns, maybe the conservation topics, development topics, infrastructure topics, other surveys, the quality of life, key issues and concerns, and then just sort of organize those, all of those discussions to lead into now the hard work, which is each one of these elements, as you mentioned. For example, protect cultural and historic resources and what we will protect. And I thought this would be a good place maybe to put the goals, the strategy, the policy, and maybe the action steps in each one of these 11 or so items. I know that you mentioned having goals and policies in the phase 1 and the initial part of that, but I think each one of these topics, like open space, for example, should have their own goal, strategy, and policy that would be incorporated eventually or codified in the zoning regulations, for example, over long term. So again, this is just a kind of a structural look at it, a framework that would help me at least to understand, is this a direction we want to go or not go? What's the consensus? It's putting something on a table, and now we can fill it out and decide, okay, this is a beginning, and but we want to change it here, here, and here. So it's just a discussion item to put on the table for for evaluation and input, which is why it was good, I think, for you to stay in this conversation a little bit longer. But this didn't come out till this afternoon. I was working on it today, so it's late, and it wasn't intended to be discussed or decided upon today, because we're not going to do that, but just to begin this process for us. Looking ahead, we've got a meeting in a week or so, or 3 weeks actually, I think is our next meeting. So as the time goes by, we just want to get some movement on this while we're together. So that's why the only reason I put this together at this stage. And that's what I meant by just being a little bit more proactive, just to say, is this what you had in mind? And if not, just tell us. Just tell us it's different. And just finally, the last sheet, which is a sample goals, strategies, and policies. I just put this together as, again, under each of your main topics. This one is just say preserve open space, and then I just made up a couple of things for. So the topic is open space. There's an overview, goals, strategies, policies. Then there's a goal that's listed there: preserve open space to protect important resources, and so on. Then there's a strategy, and then there's a policy: actively seek to identify and preserve important open space properties, and then action steps. And sometimes you can put in that, who is to take the action and who's a partner in it, for example. So again, just as a way to maybe concisely set up an outline form that maybe could be followed, so give us a little bit of sense of direction on where we're headed. So,
Okay.
sorry you got it so late, and it's on your vacations, which is, so I can understand why you didn't spend a lot of time on it. But again, just, this is here for discussion. It's not anything this came out of one person, and we haven't even talked about it here on the board, so.
Yeah, well, the draft outline, like I said, is a pretty typical approach to a master plan or a comprehensive plan. These things can be ordered or presented according to how you want them. So say, for example, in this outline, you have conditions and trends. Like you say, that's your data. That data can be summarized in the plan. It can be summarized by topic, or it could be summarized in its own section, or it could be summarized in a separate section. But you want to have that data underpinning, right, to lend some gravity to your overall approach. Community issues and concerns, that is where we'll talk about what the community process looked like. Make sure that people understand that the community was consulted and consulted heavily throughout the process. Give a sense of the community's overall vision, because it really is the community that establishes the vision.
Right.
And their sort of their feedback on topics, specific topics, recreation, municipal budgeting, whatever it is. So you have it separated out here. That's fine. Many plans do it. And what we can do is send you some. I have some of the award-winning plans throughout the country. I mean, granted, they're usually from major cities, but you can see how these things are presented, and that might give you a sense of where you can be flexible and creative and see what works for you.
Yep.
Many places do it topically, what we will protect, how we will grow. If you as a group think that will resonate best in Hamilton, that's fine. Certainly other places do that as well. I would just say that in that you want to cross-reference it for people who, like Patrick, who have to actually refer to the plan pretty consistently to make sure that they can find things that they need out of the plan fairly quickly. So that can be done in a summary document. It could be done with, like I said, cross-referencing or icons for certain things. Like a page could be transportation, but maybe it has a sustainability aspect to it. So you could have each section topic could have its own icon, and then somebody could just see what they're looking for. So how the plan will look, I think this is a good outline of what needs to be in it. How it eventually looks is really up to you as a committee, and whether it makes good sense for Hamilton. And we can have that discussion as we go through. We can, like I said, we'll send you some links so you can see what really the most forward-thinking plans look like and get a sense of what can be done.
Good.
Wonderful.
I would not recommend doing an outline approach to your actions, though. That at best it should be a grid or something like that, so that it's easily referenced.
Yep.
Caroline, I have just a thought. You just talked about sending us links to big city master plans. It would probably be more helpful and more relevant if we saw smaller community plans. Since
We'll see if we can find them. A lot of smaller communities have really small budgets. The point of the award-winning plans is that they have big budgets and they can create innovative ideas that we can steal cheaply.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Jack, may I ask Carolyn, in your experience, what percentage of citizen participation is a credible foundation for dealing with these questions? How will we grow? What will we protect, et cetera? The we cannot be the steering committee. The we must be the public. So what percentage do you view as an appropriate goal?
You mean in terms of the percentage of the public?
Yes.
Yeah, that's always a tricky question. And the rule of thumb people say is 10%. But that number doesn't mean a lot. We're looking for quality participation and cross-cutting participation, not just a number. And so, you know, I think we need to think carefully. I mean, yeah, we can look at surveys and we can put out surveys and we can think about, okay, we can do an online survey and we can corroborate it with a paper survey and we can set a goal for participation. But it's not going to really, I mean, there's nothing we can do if we don't make it. We can't make people fill out a poll. So we have to think about who are the constituencies in the town that we need to reach and hear from. What is the best forum to reach them? Is it in person? Is it attending their events? Are there local networks that we need to be tapping into? Is there local leadership that we need to consult with? That's where you come in. How do we get a representative participation, not just a number?
But I think we have to cross different biases, and I mean, I think there are strong biases within the town. Old people probably don't care about walking up and down trails. I do, but not very few others do at this age. And I think somehow we've got to balance biases more than 10% or more than percentage of population, and see where we can. That synthesis is going to be the difficult thing to ultimately come to, as far as I can see.
So I think we're capturing a little bit of what I was going to ask, and Carolyn, I don't think I don't need you to give a specific answer, but I think I've had some experience this past year on the school committee with the loudest voices don't necessarily represent. I'll really only speak to this year. There was a large number of people. Let's just put it this way. You occasionally write an email when you're absolutely thrilled with something being spectacular once in a while. People often write an email when they're upset or angry, but nobody ever writes an email and says, yeah, things are pretty good. It's okay. And we need to tap into here to talk to those people too. So I'm not asking for you to give an answer right now, but it is a concern that we don't want the squeaky wheels, but we also don't want the extremes, right? We don't want only to hear from the people who are absolutely thrilled or absolutely furious. We want to know about the people, and those people are often not engaged. So, and then, if I may, since I have the floor, I just want to say, Emil, I think this is really very helpful. This is a very new process to me, but I am a parent coach, and I do individual visioning with individual families, and something very similar. And I think what's really, essential here is, I love these, what we will protect, what we will grow, what we will provide, because they get to not just, it's the idea of, we want to look at what is working, and I love that. We want to know what is working so that we can grow it. So I just was really excited, and from my microcosm experience, I think you're on track, and I'm excited about it. So thank you.
I'll just echo that. I love the structure as well. And I know once we get more content going, it may, change a little bit, but I think overall it makes sense. It really helps, for me, make this more concrete and understand what it can look like at the end of the day. And, whether or not it's outline form or a graph or a chart, but I really like the goals, strategies, policies, and action steps, because I just think it can be very simple, and we can just drill it down and make it very actionable. And I think that is, for me, one of the most important things in this process is I really want to produce something that people read and use and follow and implement, very easily, and not just the planning board, but the community at large. And we hold our representatives responsible because we understand it and we have access to it, and it's very actionable.
It's very human. Your approach is very human and very humane, and it takes a potentially very didactic, dry bunch of material, and it humanizes it. It makes you think about it, and that's why I thought it was so important that we talk about your approach, because Caroline talks about a more traditional approach, and yours is a bit of a new way of thinking, and it makes you want to be involved in the process, I think, because the language is so it's so endearing, and it's not just the facts. Okay, this is what we have, and this is so what do you want to do? It's making you it helps people to visualize the whole town. What's important to me? What do I want to protect? And I think it's a wonderful approach. So that's why I thought it was important to have Caroline stay and give us her opinion as well. And while I have the floor, I just wanted to ask a question. And thinking about how to engage people, I think part of it is you need to go to the source, right? You need to go to where a particular demographic is. And I think that I think about the senior center. We're working, Council on Aging, we're working really hard to engage the seniors in this town, all demographics and all levels of ability. And I think, and this is just throwing it out there, what if we went into the senior center and had a discussion and maybe a survey to some degree that's user-friendly to them, because I think a lot of seniors would be very intimidated to come to a forum. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just thinking, how do we bring this process to the people? And I'm wondering if you think that, or if anybody thinks that would be a viable way, at least for one segment of the population, to do it.
I'd have to say that the other thing I think that serves very nicely is a checklist, that there are more things to consider than one aspect of the town, whether it's the schools or whatever it may be, particularly the historic elements. Does anybody care about the historic elements here anymore? I mean, is that important? Connecting wildlife corridors, things of that nature. Where are the priorities these days? And I think we've got to find that out.
And by combining
Spells them
some of
out.
these things together, it really is, it doesn't cause silos. It helps people to think cohesively, so.
By way of a quick example of the difficulty we're facing in terms of public engagement, Carolyn, you suggested we try to identify stakeholders, and I contacted the Council on Aging and indicated my availability to come and speak with them, or the board, and they asked for some guidance. So I sent in an email some of these categories. And then I met with them this week, and Rosie was kind enough to attend also. And they had not focused on any of the criteria. They had other questions about how can we work to mitigate a tax rate by public service, et cetera, et cetera. So they did not focus on the generic categories that we have here. It's going to be hard, and I, for one, will feel very insecure about issuing a report if we have minimal public participation. I don't want the we in Emil's wonderful work product. I don't want the we to be we.
Yeah.
I want the we to be the public.
If I could just jump in on that, I mean, I just think that speaks to the value of the kinds of questions that Emil has framed here that are compelling, that draw you in, that we internally can map to the topic areas that we really need the hard data on. But you can even, if we can hide that within a really capturing question, people don't even realize they're answering the questions that we need them to answer, right?
I think something we talked about, I don't think it was the last meeting, I think it was the first meeting, was like coming up with some type of like speakers bureau toolkit or something where we have a script when we're going somewhere that, we say, this is what the master plan is. Here's what we can impact. Here's what we can't impact, i.e. tax your taxes. And then, have those questions phrased in a way that get the feedback where you don't even know you're talking about, historical conservation, et cetera. And so I really think we need to have something that we're all speaking from. And I think going to groups and people is the way to go, and not wait for people to come to us. I know, Carolyn, part of the plan is to have forums, and I think that's a great idea. We should do that. But I'm just, we have all the Friends of Cutler, Friends of the middle school, like, go to those groups and do this. The Hamilton Wenham Mothers Club, just talk to the Hamilton moms. And, those are all kid and parent groups, but those are, some of the ones that are coming to mind for me. And just go to those groups, speak from this script, ask those questions in a compelling way, and then, bring that back to this group.
Is there a high school group?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There. I think each
Tap into that.
I think each school has a Friends of, which is a parent group. But then even go to the, I had mentioned the 8th grade civics class. Engage those students, engage the high school students, and so go to them. But I really do want to just emphasize speaking from the same book, and so I think we should work on, if we're already doing some outreach, I think we need a script and questions sooner rather than later.
Yeah, survey.
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, in terms of a script, I know I wasn't there, but one of the things is that this kind of is a script, so if someone wants to say, I really want to talk about the tax rate, it's a great opening to say, why? What would that do for you? Tell me about, and then right there you can say, and what, I can't afford to live here, or I want to, okay, well, why do you want to live here? What is it about? You can dive right in. I think Kristen is on to something that, like, we can use this as a script, because that's really relevant. If someone is saying, if you're trying to say, I want to talk about these topics, and they're saying, I want to talk about the tax rate, these questions are a great way to say, like,
the whole emphasis on this actually is economic development.
Right.
That's what's going to come out of this, and everything is connected. And when you follow this through, you can see that you can actually demonstrate how the economy is going to improve by building better, not just bigger, for example, and don't destroy what you have, building indiscriminately.
Yeah. But it makes,
you're gonna build,
right,
but
it makes sense that people they say the thing that they want.
Yeah.
It makes sense, but I think that Kristen is 100% right, that, like, if we can have sort of a talking point about how to say, I hear what you're saying, and tell me about how that would get to where you want to be, and what is that you want to be?
Creating the talking points is not a problem, and really should form part of our community engagement plan. I guess the only thing that gives me pause is if we have members of the master plan committee having these conversations and they're hearing things, there is a tendency to filter and hear what you want to hear, or hear, you know what I mean, or push back or engage in ways that isn't really community engagement. And so I guess I'd want to think a little more carefully. You definitely want to stimulate people to understand what the master planning process is. You want them to get engaged. And hearing if they want to talk about their taxes, that's an issue that maybe we need to know about, that's not something that was on our radar, but if you're hearing it, then it might be relevant. But I guess I would caution having individual members of the committee going out and gathering community engagement in a sort of unofficial way, or in even if there were more of you, so that you have a couple of people who can verify what is being heard. And it's just really hard. That's why I have Sydney here. It's really hard to participate and also observe. And in the aspect of community engagement, you need to be observers, and not
listeners.
And Carolyn, that's exactly,
you know what I'm saying?
That's exactly why I said script. So because I think that in order for us to get the feedback we're looking for, we can't rely on you all to be the only gatherers of that in person. Just budgetarily, I don't think, financially we can do that. And so I think we do need to utilize individual community members, but I totally hear you on the personal biases. And so that's why I'm calling it a script and having like a little, like speakers training so that we are eliminating that as much as possible. And I like the idea about going out in teams or groups to try to hold each other accountable. But I think if we really, again, if we want a lot of feedback from a variety of groups and individuals, we are going to have to go to them, and we are going to have to do that as individual community members. But I hear you, and I totally agree. And so that, again, that's why I keep saying script that we stick to, and we don't insert, it's very.
Yeah. But you'll stick to your script, but your people will throw you off that script very quickly.
Well, that's why I suggested maybe a survey, right?
That's what I'm thinking too. So that people are answering a set of questions.
Right, that some smarty pants comes up with the right questions, and maybe some of us go out and just have a chat with people and ask them if they would fill out the survey. And when they do, maybe what other information they would share with us is something that we could bring back to the group.
Yeah, I agree. It could be I think a survey serves a role, the forums serve a role,
right.
And then there's absolutely a role for kind of additional information that is generated through that process, as long as it's consistently scoped. And,
exactly. Yeah.
Basically, you're serving as a scribe at that point.
Yeah.
People are talking at you, and you're writing down what they're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think we're saying the same thing, we're just using different words.
In addition to this, if people are comfortable or able to or have access to Wi-Fi and the internet, if you guys go out and you initiate these conversations and you say, this is the master plan, this is the process, this is what it does, then it gets them thinking. If you could then direct them to participate in online, I will open up an open discussion forum. People can write whatever thoughts that they want on there. So that way that any information they convey to you is not, you summarize when you're writing down notes, when you're trying to write down what people are saying. I summarize everything that you guys are writing or saying in this meeting. So maybe directing them to that online platform could give them that outlet. They can write down exactly what they mean, exactly what they want, and then we have access to that. Everybody else has access to that. People can reply. That stimulates them thinking about the same things, or maybe they start thinking about new ideas off of what others have said. If they do not feel comfortable about going online and saying these things, you could offer for them to write it down and send it in an open letter to you guys, and then you guys could then send that to us. So if they want to write it, or if they want to type it and they don't want to participate in the online form, then that's a way that they can still record their responses in their own words and get that information across to us.
I think that's a really good point. And it kind of loops back to what Kristen had said at the beginning, where, one item of discussion was brought up that there is a master plan happening and 70 people already kind of had thoughts on it. And so it does provide an outlet for open discussion at length, not just limited to the valuable feedback we'd get via a survey, but broader discussions.
I think you lose the nuance, though, online.
They're complementary, right? Yeah.
It's just another bias
Yeah.
to be aware of.
Yeah.
Now, look, folks, it's 7 minutes after the hour. We need to set up an agenda for our next meeting. And are we going to take this on, or what is the thinking at this stage?
I think we need to finalize the committee procedures that we talked about last week, Kristen's document.
That's item number 1 on the agenda.
Yes, it was supposed to be tonight, but we'll do that next week.
So we'll do that next week.
Right. And I've drafted a description of treasurer, and I'll pass that around, and you can digest that, spit it out.
I can also send you guys the revised, I have it, and if you wanted to talk about it tonight, but the revised rules and regs with, question mark treasurer, as well as the procedures we talked about tonight about consultant communication. So I can send that around before our next meeting.
Okay, great.
I don't know whether we need to or not, but I heard discussion about finalizing or creating a mission statement. Do we need to do that?
Right.
I think that's an evolutionary process. It's going to be longer term, though.
Well, I like the Amel's the five the protect group provide. I don't know if we want to think about that a little more at the next meeting in terms of that guiding principles of kind of how we want to organize this in preparation for the meeting in August, where we're talking about the whole outline, just to give Carolyn a little more feedback from this committee before she comes back with the larger outline in August.
I love that idea, Kristen, about using what we're proposing at this point for the outline of the plan. Maybe use some of that language in the mission statement, like tying kind of all that together. Would it be helpful, Carolyn, if we prepared some thoughts for that timetable? Like if we have an idea, like I guess what I'm saying is, should we talk about at our next meeting things that we know about that are coming up over the next year and a half that could be helpful to you to inform that timetable? So should that be an agenda
anything
item?
you can send through the pipeline that you know of, we can incorporate it in the plan. I could even try and create holding spots so that we know how like the overall calendar of the year looks, like a community calendar, and how we can try and fit into it.
Another potential agenda item could be the community engagement strategy that Carolyn said she's going to send out, that it's very rudimentary, but needs are kind of fleshing out. That could be something we talk about.
Well, for me also, survey questions that maybe, Caroline, you've used in the past that are really productive, and how would you set it up? You know, would it be a set of 5 options, strongly agree, strongly disagree? Or is there a better way to set that up based on your experience?
Yeah, I have, there's this sort of first blush surveys that are usually pretty high level, and they're not very long, but it's just kind of a way of getting people just starting to think, and it could be like, tell us your 3 favorite things about Hamilton.
Yeah.
Tell us 3 things you'd like to change about Hamilton. Really basic, but you can get some really good feedback, and it gets people appreciating, and also making sure that we put back out to the public the results, because people love to see how poll results come out. So we can do that on our social pinpoint, or we can do it on the town website. Or another thing we could think about doing is starting to gather people's email addresses if they're interested in getting newsletters or something from us. These are things to think about in the community engagement process. But yeah, we have survey questions we can give to you, and you can see how that works.
And like utilizing like Facebook, Instagram, all of those avenues just seems like a really low-hanging fruit. As well.
All right, well, I think we've got a full agenda for the next meeting.
Carolyn, before we adjourn, you had promised to provide us with copies of the monthly invoices. So if there were any generated for May, although the contract was signed late May, certainly June, there must be one for June.
I don't know that there was, but I'll check.
Thank you.
And are we, Patrick, what are we doing on the minutes? Are we going to have written minutes that's going to come out of these meetings that we'll review, or how's that working?
I think that we should.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
How are we going to generate them? Who's going to generate them?
I thought we talked about at the last meeting that that's in Weston and Sampson's scope of work.
It is, yeah.
Right.
Do they know that? Caroline, did you hear that?
I'm just assuming that between Sydney and I, we're combining our notes and sending it to you, like we have been doing. The only problem I think is how detailed you want the minutes to be, because for whatever reason on this Zoom, I see my own face. I don't necessarily see who's talking, so I don't always know who's talking.
I think this potentially warrants another conversation about a clerk.
Yeah.
Right, at the next meeting.
But I also don't, at this point, I think that your notes are going to be helpful, and I don't know that we need,
Yeah.
we don't need to be too in the weeds on the minutes, we just want.
They weren't here at the last meeting, and they won't be here at the next meeting.
Correct, that's true.
So that's the clerk.
But Patrick will be here for, and they can, oh, right, but then they'd have to view the whole
Yeah, no,
meeting
yeah,
to
yeah.
be able to write minutes, so that might be a problem.
I am recording the minutes as part of the Zoom recording, if that's helpful to people.
So so Patrick, you're actually writing minutes, you're.
Well, I'm taking
Right.
notations,
Okay,
just so I can try to keep up.
put some minutes
Topical
together.
summary, I think, probably would
Yeah.
pretty much take care of it, and then to the
Yes.
extent.
I think so.
Yes. To Caroline's point, I'm not sure that the minutes need to be into that,
Who said what?
Dana said this,
Yeah.
and Rosie said that, and I think it's more,
Yeah.
Just general topics of discussion.
Okay,
Caroline, it would be helpful if you are looking for some data points that you need locally for us as a committee to figure out how to get that information. If you can't already, just get it directly from Patrick. So if there's stuff that you can't get from Patrick that we might need to discuss, it would be helpful to know what those are.
Yeah, yeah. We'll think about that.
Okay.
It might be, if there's things that we need to know about schools, or I'm just thinking things that aren't.
Yeah, just think about it, but if you can send it before our next meeting, just so if the committee needs to discuss, we can at least get that in progress.
And did you guys, I may have missed this, but did you guys send out a list of your elected committee members and who, or did you guys even decide on that?
The chairs, you mean?
The chair.
The chairs.
The chair.
oh, yeah. I'm the chair, Kristen Kasner is the vice chair. David is,
Not yet.
that's all we decided on thus far. We have,
We're going to talk about a treasure at the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, something to just add to the webpage. I wanted to add your guys' headshots and titles for the committee so people can identify you. I have received 3 headshots, so if I could receive the rest of yours, that would be great. And they will be going online, so whatever you're comfortable with putting online.
They haven't received mine.
okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you,
Enjoy the rest of
Caroline.
your vacation.
Enjoy your vacation that we just
Thank you.
destroyed.
Have a good evening.